Hello, everyone. I'm happy to see so many of you still here this late in the day. I know it's been a long day, so I'll try to be brief, I promise. I'll summarize the entire day in less than 10 minutes. So when we first announced the title of the conference, The Arab World Beyond Conflict, I kept getting the same question from people, as Dan also asked. So they said, do you mean imagining the Arab world without conflict? Do you want to discuss the Arab world in a post-war era? Do you want to talk about issues in the Arab world besides conflict and violence? And the answer is all of the above and probably more. And so last week, when we had to translate the title into Arabic, we had a little bit of a crisis of our own, as you might imagine. If anybody has ideas, we'd love some help. So this, as many of you have suggested, this may not be the best time to be talking about issues as state building and governance reforms, much less reconstruction in the region, especially when more urgent crises like humanitarian disaster, refugees, and deadly violence afflict the region and its people. And these more pressing issues consequently drive international attention and funding, as you all know. But this is precisely why we chose to focus the title this year on the Arab world beyond conflict, to be able to delve into issues outside the narrow lens of conflict and beyond ad hoc response to disaster. We also wanted to move away from the usual conversations here in Washington that look at the Arab world from a US national security perspective. And I believe one of the speakers referred to this today earlier as the American-led security architecture, which has so far failed, and quite miserably, if I may add. And now, especially under the current US administration, we're seeing more and more of this approach. And that's why we decided to focus this year's program on the theme of building capacities and human development, building transparent and inclusive state institutions, and establishing regional and relations and strategies. These issues matter not only because of US national security or for counterterrorism or stabilization efforts, but because human rights, development, freedoms, and equal opportunities are important values to support in and of themselves. And I think the speakers today did a great job in providing some great insights and models to look forward to an Arab world, not necessarily without conflict, just to reiterate Dan's view, but maybe in a less of a complex situation. What was perhaps the most unique aspect of today's conversations is maybe the relatively positive and hopeful tone in looking at the Arab world, or maybe at least not as depressing as these conversations usually are. As one speaker said earlier today, that we have constructed this system or this order, and we can also construct an alternative order. So I thought I would highlight three main takeaways briefly from the presentations that we heard today. Don't worry, I'm not going to summarize the entire 8 hours. So three main themes. The first one has to do with interrelations, or rather interrelatedness. Although we can't speak about the Arab world as one homogeneous entity, we cannot deal with Arab countries in isolation and without considering the different regional, global, and historical factors. The region is facing multiplying conflicts with divergent origins, but these crises are intersecting and intertwined, and they need to be considered in that respect. In fact, as we heard today, there is advantage in viewing the region as a whole, especially with regard to development and sharing resources and expertise. And this also relates to another issue that was mentioned today, which is reforming relations between national, regional, and international actors so that they can play a more constructive role and emphasize rights-based approaches that are mutually beneficial to change, if you will, the current order and the hierarchies that exist. Our morning keynote speaker, in fact, said that part of the failures in the Arab world today is the inability to work together. The second theme or takeaway that I would like to highlight has to do with good governance. We've heard that while the existence of state institutions and structures are important, we have seen the dire consequences of failed states and governance vacuums. The mere presence of these institutions is not enough. We heard about the importance of establishing models of inclusive economies, equitable application of the rule of law, meritocracy, accountability, transparency, political representations, all these beautiful things that we heard throughout the day today. And so, as one speaker, in fact, said, good governance is probably the main ingredient to preventing conflict. The third takeaway has to do with people. Investing in people and granting them agency. The most important development indicators, such as freedom of expression, women's participation, and the quality of education, are centered around citizens' rights and opportunities. Human development and education at all levels are necessary, but also governments need to serve their people. And we've heard this theme throughout the day in the different panels. They need to serve their people and afford them rights, freedoms, and possibilities to utilize those skills and capacities. But more importantly, human development is a continuous process and cannot be delayed until conflict is over. One of the speakers said today, the lack of security cannot be a pretext to do nothing. And in my view, this is the primary message that I take from the discussions today. The Arab world is grappling with a continuous balancing act between security and stability on one side and freedoms and equal rights on the other. But the absence of stability cannot be a pretext to do nothing about freedoms and rights. And in fact, this is an important part of our mission at Arab Center Washington, D.C., to provide Arab perspectives to US foreign policy in the region that emphasize human rights, democracy, and civil liberties, while exploring ways for just and peaceful resolution to conflict. I do hope that you found the presentations today interesting and thought-provoking, and that the discussions and debates would lead to new models and paradigms in looking at the challenges facing the region. And on that note, I am happy to announce that we are going to publish a book titled The Arab World Beyond Conflict. It will include some of the topics and papers that were presented today. The Arab Center Washington, D.C. will publish the book in early 2019, so stay tuned. Finally, I would like to thank all the speakers today for offering their insights, analyses, and recommendations, and some of them for traveling to be here today. I would also like to thank the boards and leadership of Arab Center Washington, D.C. for their continuous support, and especially the staff for the great work they have done on this conference. On behalf of Arab Center Washington, D.C., thank you all for joining us today, those in the room and those who are following us online. We hope that you can follow up on our work. Don't forget to visit our website, arabcenterdc.org, and we hope to see you at our future events. Thank you, and have a great evening.